Welcome to HomeWord. I'm Jim Burns. So happy you've joined us today. Actually, it's an honor that you would be with us, and it's an honor that people from all over the world do listen in, watch us on the YouTube channel. What a great way to communicate great topics. Today, a very special guest, Camille Block, is with us today, and she wrote a book called Hope for Secondhand Suffering, Tools for the Heart When You Can't Fix Your Loved One's Pain. Well, you know what? She has an amazing story. And at the same time, we all need this because in one way or another, I was thinking about our own personal family where Kathy took care of her mom for 11 years until she passed away. And you know what? Even though Camille's story is different, it just fits so well with any of us who have had that kind of an experience. After reading her book, I feel like I know her. Actually, when I met her, I had not met her. We have a mutual friend friends, Jim and Sonia Hodson. But you know what happened is I hugged her, and then I went, wait, I don't even know this woman, but it was just, her book is amazing. It's called Hope for Secondhand Suffering. I suggest that you take a look at it and get it. All the information is in our show notes, and really, honestly, it's so inspiring. Most important is about her is not only that she has written this book, she's an entrepreneur, she's a career coach, but the most important part of it is that she actually is an advocate for her brother. She's the voice for her beloved Kevin, who lives with cerebral palsy, quadriplegia. We'll understand that later, just exactly what that means. What an incredible woman to do this for her brother, who's actually 54 years old, or at least in the book, 54 years old. Let me introduce Camille to you. Camille Block, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Jim. It's so nice to be here.
So good to be with you. Honestly, before we were having the podcast and we were just talking, I feel like I've known you forever. As I mentioned, I loved your book. And you know, I read books every week because I do podcasts every week. In fact, I have 3 back-to-back this time, so I'm really, in the book mode. And I was saying to my wife, I just go, this is a great message for all of us. It's a message of hope in the midst of some really tough stuff. And that's the world. It's messy. Life is messy. And I think God is okay with messes. And I think you did such a great job. But I want you to, as we talk about hope for secondhand suffering, I want you to introduce us to Kevin. Even in the book, you have pictures of Kevin. I got to know him. I got to know you. Talk to us about Kevin, your brother.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm amazed that you read that in a week. That's well done. It's a bit long for a book, but I did add pictures, so I'm hoping it breaks up. But yes, my brother Kevin is really special to me. And when I was, 3.5 years old, we're 3.5 years apart, he was born. And something was very special about him from day one. I wasn't sure what, and my parents kept telling me, your brother's special. And I was like, what does that really mean? And I just loved him. To me, it was just normal baby. But there was a lot going on, and I knew something was a little off, but I couldn't figure out, is that young of a child? Yeah. But as we aged older, I became his protector. I was in charge of my brother a lot, and my biggest remembrance of those early years when he lived with us was sitting next to him and holding up his head. His right head drops, and he would have this little red chair, and I wish I could find a picture of that one. I can't. And he would just drop his head, and we'd watch Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, or Romper Room, which I talk about in the book a little bit. And my job was like to hold up his head and just sit by him, and like, life was good then. It was pretty simple for a child.
Life was really hard for him.
Yeah. Unfortunately, when he got to be age 3.5, my other brother had been born, and so my mom had her hands full with 3 kids under like 5-ish, 6 at the most. And they were told, he has cerebral palsy. At that point he didn't have quadriplegia because he could still move, but he had very severe cerebral palsy, and they didn't know how serious it was. And so eventually, at that age, 3.5, there was an opening at an institution not far from us, about 40 minutes away, actually. He started going to the day program at first, and they eventually put him in there because they were told there's only 1 bed left, and it's for children. And the doctors said, he'll never know any better, and he needs to be with people like him and just take care of your other 2 kids. And so my parents were at the age of, this early 70s listening. The doctors were the experts. And, they told him, well, he'll never know any different. He'll be happier there. As a child, I knew that was probably not true. And so when they took him away, it was very traumatic, to the point where even in the last 2 years, I really didn't realize how traumatic it was when they literally moved him out of our home. Wow. So since then, he's lived a life in the same place. They've taken great care of him. They've kept him alive. Yeah. But the knowledge of what his illness and disease was wasn't fully known then. Now it is. Now there's different things we would do for kids with severe cerebral palsy. And unfortunately, he didn't have all those things. He didn't learn to read. He didn't learn, we didn't realize then that he actually didn't have brain damage. Some people with cerebral palsy do, but it's actually a motor cortex damage that affects his control of his movements and his ability to communicate. He's nonverbal. So if we had known then what we know now, I think there could have been a lot more we could have
might have done it differently. Yeah. Even with your parents, and you get into this in the story. You said that at some time we all come to realize that life is unfair, and you learn that partly from your brother.
Yeah, I think I learned that at an early age, and I talk about how I didn't always feel like I fit in with my peers. They were worried about things that wasn't really a worry for me. Yeah. I had a greater perspective, and I think I dealt with sadness at a much earlier age. Didn't really realize I was dealing with sadness. It's only now looking back that I can use those words.
Yeah.
But it was a heavy load as a sister.
And life isn't unfair. Is unfair, and that's something we all need to know. That's what we need to know with our children as we raise our kids. We need to know that in our marriages if we're married. And life is unfair. I mean, I've said that to my kids when they were younger. I'd go, well, you know what? They'd go, that's not fair, Dad. I go, well, you know what? Sometimes life's not fair.
Yeah.
But when you see somebody suffering or struggling, it's even harder. There's a quote in your book that I thought was so insightful. I mean, it's your quote, but you said, I wondered if my mom secretly wished that God would have taken him to spare him the life he would live without any control over his body. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, it's hard because my mom passed away 11 years ago. So I think I can speak more freely because, but then I think she's listening to me and telling me, be careful what you say. But
isn't that amazing? Our parents died.
Oh, they still speak to us.
Sure.
Yes. So I think I just meant that my mom had a really hard time.
Yeah.
My mom and she and my dad, I talk about, they had different reactions, same pain, same suffering.
Right.
I think that she didn't realize how hard his life would be and how horrible it would be. Being nonverbal in a body that doesn't move and don't work, and he can't scratch an itch, he can't say what he needs. He can't. I mean, I think she didn't realize. And as he aged, I mentioned the book. There were friends that supported, and when he was in the hospital, prayed and all that. Yeah, I think that at some point, I think she may have. I don't know if she said that, but I think that from what we did talk about, I think she did wonder maybe he would have been better off not. But
I think there's a lot of people who think that. I mean, those are not her words; those are your words.
Yeah.
But I think there are people who would have said, especially in that season, because you're talking about the 70s. So we didn't have the kind of information that we now have about certain medical things and things like that, and parents just went with whatever the doctor would say in some ways. And it's interesting because you have a chapter called "Trust Your." Well, I don't know if it's called this, but it's my quotes from it. Trust your gut and give it a voice.
Yeah,
I love that. What does that mean?
Well, the title before I changed it was called "Be the Squeaky Wheel."
Yeah.
I thought, well, that's a little negative. So and I kept thinking, for me, I think that I dismissed myself growing up as a sister as, well, I don't know any better. My parents know everything. The doctors know everything. And I kind of just became a voiceless, I have no vote on any of this. But in my gut, I always knew something was different about Kevin. I thought a lot of people, my parents probably knew too. I knew he wasn't brain damaged. I knew he was in there. And I just had this instinct about, we need to fight. These are not right. But they put a G tube in him and he loved food. It's like, why? Well, he's getting aspiration pneumonia. It's like, yeah, but can he get that other ways too? And, it's like every time, just everything he's been through, I've had a gut instinct that I'm not sure this is the right decision.
Yeah. No, I like
and
that.
It's like the people that were making the decisions, they didn't love him like I did. My parents were in a different generation. They trusted the doctors. Well, they know best.
I get it.
And then, so when I didn't have a vote, you feel very helpless, very hopeless.
Yeah.
And so, the shift comes as I started realizing, wait, I can trust my gut.
Sure.
I'm not dumb. This is not always right. There could be a different way to fight this.
Yeah.
Why aren't they asking the questions? Why aren't they getting the second opinions, the third opinions? Why aren't they researching? Well, we didn't have the internet like we do,
Sure.
So I guess
so you are now his advocate. I mean, in some ways, mom and dad have both passed. Is that right?
No, my dad is actually, we're both co-conservators,
okay, got it.
Which usually means medical, but in my case, it's everything.
Sure.
But he has turned it over more to me. He's 83 and he likes the decisions I've made, but technically I involve him with everything.
Yeah, and so you were much more. When you think of the word advocate, you were much more of an advocate. You were much more of the person who were kind of with your gut. You're saying, "Wait, I need to bring this to the front." Do you suggest that that's what people should do in most cases when there's secondhand suffering?
Well, I do. I do because I've learned it helps.
Yeah.
It helps the second. I mean, my goal in this book is to help give people hope for secondhand suffering. And one of the tools is, yes, be an advocate, trust your gut, question, ask questions, get the second opinions, and be that person that old school doctors don't like.
Yeah.
New school doctors kind of like us. They're okay with us. It's the old school doctors like, don't question me. I'm like, you haven't met me yet.
No,
here we go.
I love that. And actually, I think you're right. I think the world has changed. And so I think sometimes doctors appreciate this. I remember a time when my mom had cancer, and I had a good friend who's an ER doctor. I just had dinner with him. He lives in Atlanta. And I was using him as my sounding board. And he said, don't let them take your mom away unless she talks to a pulmonologist. So I said to the doctor, I said, so I have a good friend who's kind of watching this. I'm kind of doing this, who's a physician. And he's telling me that I shouldn't let mom be released from the hospital until she sees a pulmonologist. I hardly even knew how to spell pulmonologist.
Right. It's hard to say too.
And he went, that's a good idea. Well, come to find out, part of her problem was that she hadn't seen a pulmonologist. I would say that probably my dad wouldn't have said anything because he trusted the doctor in a good way. And this doctor was not a bad person.
Right. Doctors are great people.
I have 3 brothers. I don't think they were going to do that. And so by me just asking that question, it actually probably gave my mom more years to live.
Yeah.
Because a pulmonologist got in front of her and helped her. But again, but I felt bad doing it. I felt like I was questioning this
Why
doctor.
did we feel
I didn't
that
go to
way?
medical school.
Where did we learn that?
I know. It's so hard. Now, there's another phrase, and this one really got me. You talk in the book about guilt. Caregivers have guilt. Parents have guilt. There's just a lot of guilt. And how does guilt fit into a caretaker of someone who's taking care of somebody like Kevin?
Yeah, I think it depends on the relationship in the family. I think there's a lot of caregivers out there that, maybe are hired and I think they feel this, but maybe not to the degree a family member.
Yeah.
So with me, the guilt was my entire life, to this day. I'm still working on it. I'm still in process. But the idea of like, why him, not me? Why, I was born out of the same womb as our mom and why? So the why question was an early one at my early age. And then like, who am I? This is one I struggle with still to this day. I'll be enjoying life, doing something fun. Like for a second, I'm not even thinking about my brother. And all of a sudden a voice comes in my head. Yeah. Why are you happy? He can't be. Why are you enjoying yourself? He can't taste that food. He can't go on that trip. He can't go to Hawaii. He can't read that book. He can't. And I hear these voices and it's haunting. Oh yeah. I should make myself suffer because he's suffering. And then I talk about what I've learned, how that doesn't actually make sense.
No, right. But it makes sense. I think you're saying what all of us think when we're in some kind of a caregiver mode. It's funny, you said Hawaii. My wife and I were in Hawaii when Kathy's mom went into hospice. She had taken care of her for 11 years, had really sacrificed and whatnot. The guilt that my wife had, I was away from mom when that took place. Was real and it's powerful.
Yeah, for sure.
Man, such a great conversation today. We're going to take a real quick break. And when we come back, a lot more to talk about with Camille Block. And all of the information for Camille, her book, which is called Hope for Secondhand Suffering, Tools for the Heart When You Can't Fix Your Loved One's Pain. It's also a great title for a book, but it's a hard one to digest.
A little long.
The book is available. You can take a look at it. There's so much in here for so many, but we'll be right back. Don't go away. More to come. Hi, everybody. Jim Burns here. And I wanted to invite you to HomeWord's Refreshing Your Marriage Conference. If you're in Southern California or you can get to Southern California, it has been a couple years since we've been in SoCal. But it's a great conference. We have Doug Fields, who is, I think, the premier speaker on marriage, incredible content, plus he's hilarious. Lucille Williams, who's written a couple books on intimacy, as well as a premarital book. She's amazing, and she's also one of the speakers. And then yours truly. And it's actually one of the most fun conferences I do all year, and actually one of the most inspiring. So it's really, really cool. So I want to invite you. All the information is in our show notes for this day with the Rosbergs. And also then next week, you can, in the next podcast, we'll have information on it as well. I'm in the middle of this. If you're getting this right at the beginning of us dropping this podcast, I'm on my way to Rice Lake, Wisconsin for this weekend, marriage conference. Austin, Texas the following week, marriage conference. And then the next week is Rome, Georgia at WindShape, which is the premier conference center and with marriages. It's amazing. So I'm in the marriage mode today. And I hope you'll join us at the Refreshing Your Marriage Conference. It's just really a great time. Welcome back. I'm Jim Burns. So happy to have you with us today. And we're talking about secondhand suffering, tools for the heart when you can't fix your loved one's pain. You know, that is true for so many of us. It could be a brother who is on drugs. It could be somebody who has strayed away from their faith and you can't do anything about it. Maybe you have adult children. It could be so many things, but this is a powerful story with Camille Block. So appreciate her being on today. Camille, you said that cultivating empathy is a discipline, not just a feeling. Is it easier for some and harder for others to do that?
100%.
Yeah.
I think so. I've met a lot of people in my life. I've done some career coaching where I meet people, and everybody's so different. And in my own family,
Right.
some people can deal with pain better.
Yeah.
So yes, I think some people are more prone to understanding what empathy is, and some people it hurts too much and they can't let themselves go there.
Yeah. And with you, with Kevin, you have a lot of empathy for him. It comes through in your book. It bleeds through. So what you're saying is you use this empathy for him to actually show him incredible love, incredible tenderness, and also stand up for him.
Yes, and also feel his pain.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think empathy, and I talk in the book, I won't go into the details because it's fun to read, but about how in college I did an experiment where I actually became him for a day.
I remember that.
And we faked out the whole day program, caregivers and workers, and I learned a lot by stepping into deep empathy, by literally walking in his shoes.
Yeah, you walked in his shoes, not that he can walk. Yeah,
and I learned a lot, and I think it shifted. I think actually as a child, I don't know that I felt it. I did feel it when I saw him, but I think that my mom kind of modeled the model of shutting down a little bit just to protect yourself.
Right.
And so I think I had a regular kind of normal public school life to some degree where I wasn't always thinking about it.
Right.
But I think that after that experiment in college, it almost, it did a gear shift up in terms of not only feeling the love, but feeling the pain.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. You went to Pepperdine University, not a bad place.
did.
It's right on the water.
Yes.
It's a beautiful spot in Malibu, California. Did you do that on that campus?
I did. Well, no. I mean, I was on the campus as a sociology major in the class where we had to do this assignment.
Right.
But no, it was in the Valley.
Someplace.
At
Yeah,
a school
I didn't
he went
catch
to.
that when it did. Yeah, and because it would be hard to do that actually at a school where they would know you.
Well, it was his school, so they just kept him home for the day.
I get it. Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, we have a new person," and they
isn't that
introduced me
amazing? What a
because
great
he would know me.
experience. Yes,
He'd
yes,
be
yes.
laughing his head off if he saw me there.
Yeah, no, that's funny. What a great experience. I loved in your book. You get to know you. So you said, I may have the record of the most majors at that school because you kind of went from thing to thing. It was really fun.
Yeah.
I love that. I related to that kind of thing. I underline this. When tragedy strikes or we feel attacked, we have choices. And this is kind of a longer quote, but I loved it. Either fight or flee, engage or withdraw, press in or retreat, turn towards God or run away from God with an attitude of anger or apathy.
That's a good quote.
That's
I
a
forgot that one.
It's a good quote. How did you do that? And I really want to talk about the spiritual element all throughout the book. We haven't really talked much about it, but all throughout the book, you leaning into God's help, you leaning into the Word of God, you leaning into your Christian faith helped that. And so you didn't turn from God. Sometimes when people go through secondhand suffering or they go through any kind of suffering, they walk away from God. This seemed to turn you toward God.
Yeah, I think there was a journey in between. I actually feel like there was a time I turned away from God. Yeah, I did.
And was it specifically because of the suffering of Kevin?
I think it was a big catalyst.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it was the normal questions that people maybe in their young 20s start asking when they're differentiating. I learned in your book, Parenting Adult Children, by the way, is very good, where you're trying to figure out your own faith. But I was challenged by my faith by a coworker when I was 23, 24, 25-ish. And I had no answers for my faith. In fact, it uncovered so much that like what is my faith based on?
Yeah.
And when I realized that's when I actually went through a lot, because the question of why would God allow someone like my brother to live a life of suffering. I had to face that head on. And I think I covered that up when I was younger because I was at I started off as more of a deist, I guess, that's a Christianese words. I don't mean to use that. But, my parents, the way they explained Kevin to me was, well, we don't believe God caused Kevin to be like this. We believe God created the world and let it spin. Mm-hmm. And that satisfied me for a short time.
Yeah.
And then as I got into the early college years, I, embraced the role of I'm a Christian. Well, what I really meant was I have good biblical principles. I don't lie. I did drink a little bit, but not much. I wasn't necessarily doing it because of a personal faith. It was more like just the principles, the good, I'm a good person. It was the good person role of Christianity. Yeah. And then when my faith was challenged, I realized, why am I being a good person if I don't even know the reasons for God's existence? I don't even know why he allowed my brother to handle this. So then I went on my own spiritual journey. And the book really does talk about many of those points in my life where I continued to gear shift up to know God better. But I did go down into neutral for a while. Well, I don't know. I don't know if he's real. And that was a hard time. We were first married and my husband was worried. It's like, I thought I married a Christian. And here I am like, I'm not sure anymore.
No, but you know what? Your authenticity that comes through in the book like crazy. I mean, that's a good thing. Most of us have those kind of moments. Those are not always bad. Sometimes those are the moments that cause us to actually understand that, wow, we want to be not in the situation we're in right now, but sometimes we have to doubt in order to find truth. And that's a good thing.
I think it's a great thing.
I mean, it's a good thing in hindsight. It's not a good thing for your husband when he married somebody he thought it was a Christian. And
he was a little worried. He was a little worried. Yeah. But no, and I went from there to different stages, and then I thought I knew it all when I got all the answers, I was Bible answer girl. Yeah. And then I got angry at God. That's another stage. Yeah. Again, re-angry because it's like I never really dealt with this anger, and that was not too long ago. Right. And then eventually I'm not eventually arrived, but I'm in a different phase now.
But God also he's okay with that. You're in a relationship. I'm in a relationship with my wife. Yeah. There's times when I get angry with her. Okay, I love her, but I still get angry with her. She gets angry at me more often probably than I get angry at her. But that's the same thing with God. I mean, we have to understand that our God cares deeply for us, and that He seeks relationship, and relationships are messy sometimes. He's okay with that.
And I was surprised I actually did find answers. I don't have it all, but I found enough that gave me, the world's answers only satisfy your soul at such a certain level. You can't go deeper. No. But when you're in relationship with God, He does start touching you in ways you can't really explain with a textbook.
Right. So here we are talking about secondhand suffering. And, the struggle that you've been through with Kevin, but you did something on joy. And on a personal level, you said, I've struggled with trying to really have joy. Joy is very different than happiness, or, you eat a great meal, or, you watch a funny movie, but deeper joy. And in your book, you talk about looking for joy, rethinking pessimism and optimism. That's not easy, is it?
No, not for someone like me. I'm always that realist, and I always challenge things. People would say, oh, well, God must have a reason. I'm like, well, I don't like it. And I'm not sure I want that God. If that's his reason, is to make us suffer to know him better. I didn't really buy that theology. And, and with all due respect to all my wonderful Christian upbringing, sometimes the church did say that a lot. We've done that. And I'm not sure that's necessarily a proven precept in the Bible. I think that there's different ways to interpret that. So I have come to believe that I don't think God is necessarily the causer of these things. I think, we live in a world that's not perfect. Yeah. We make choices. We play a part in that, choices that are made, and sometimes things we can't understand. But when I think that the anger at God came out of thinking, a lot of people would tell me, well, God must have a reason. Everything happens for a reason, or you can't question God. God's sovereign. And, and I was like, you know what? I don't think... Jesus talks about like praying, things would be on earth as they are in heaven. I don't think in heaven people are suffering. So I don't think that's the heart of God. Maybe he allows it. Yes, we can have that conversation. But the other was the causation. I struggled. So until I wrestled and got answers for myself, I could be wrong, but I feel like the peace that passes understanding now is like, that's not the heart of God. Yeah. Maybe he does in some cases for reasons we can't understand. But for me, I couldn't go there with my brother. When I got those answers, it made me love him more.
Yeah, no, I like that. In people who study spiritual formation, they talk about when children, they first own their parents' faith. They don't own their own faith. They come to a time where they own their own faith.
Right.
And then they come to a time where they can't put it all together. And that's actually what they talk about is deeper spiritual formation when you say, I don't have all this together. I don't understand it all. One day I will, because there's eternity, because we believe in eternity. But that's okay. And I think we have to get to a place sometimes where we go, it doesn't fit all nice and neat. Mm-hmm. And I think there's people who are even listening or watching today who might be going, you know what, my life doesn't fit nice and neat. Well, you know what, I think God's okay with that. We just have to understand that, yeah, we can accept things or we can have anger. Or we can go, I have no idea exactly why, Kevin was put on earth in this manner. And at the same time, what a journey it's been. And I look forward to him being healed and whole, mm-hmm. Not having pain, being able to talk and walk and all that when he gets to heaven. And there is that neat part. Mm-hmm. But I think sometimes we Christians make it too trite,
Totally. And for people like me, that doesn't work. It backfires.
Right.
Makes me
right.
mad at you for saying that.
Right. Yeah. No, I get it. I totally get it. So we don't have much time left, but I wanted to ask this question because your book I could have done 3 hours on this. You can tell I'm just touching the surface. And I chose not, you have great principles in here, and I chose not to take some of the principles as much as more through your life and what you've learned. What did I miss in this conversation? What is it that needs to be said in terms of the conversation we're having on hope with, for anybody who's helping somebody with secondhand suffering?
Wow. Yeah, I do wish I prepared for that because I could say 1,000 things. You didn't, you got the heart of the message, but I feel like, I think that what I've really come to learn lately is that it's a heart journey.
Yeah.
Everything's about the heart, the transformation of the heart.
Yeah, I like it.
And let's not miss the opportunity to go through life without examining the heart.
Right.
And so, for me, it helps to frame, we're body, soul, spirit. We're all three. And if we, exercise and take care of our body, and, maybe the soul, if you think of it as mind, emotions, will, we read good books, we're a good person, and we ignore the spirit, we're not going to be balanced. Think of a 3-legged stool, it's going to topple. So I feel like all three we need to feed.
So
and
good.
all three are important. And I think that suffering can be a way, especially secondhand suffering, because we're physically actually maybe okay. Hopefully we look fine on the outside, but we're suffering deeply. Don't miss the opportunity to find God through that process, and don't paint over it as if everything's fine when it's not. Allow yourself to go there. Find purpose from your pain. Ask the hard questions.
Wow.
Trust your gut. Be able to be a voice for the voiceless. There is a purpose that can come from suffering, especially secondhand suffering. And for the secondhand sufferers, you're not alone. I'm giving language to allow this conversation to happen because it's a journey through, not around suffering.
For somebody who didn't prepare, you just gave an incredibly articulate and beautiful statement. So beautiful. Thank you.
That's a miracle.
No, so good, Camille. This has been an amazing time. I kind of feel like we were walking on holy ground, kind of listening to what you had to say. Thank you, honestly, for who you are. You are a special person. Some people could not do what you have done, even with your brother. I'm sure that in his heart and in his brain, which works fine, he's so deeply grateful. Anyway, the book is called Hope for Secondhand Suffering. I suggest you go get it. All the information is on the show notes. Before we go, as you know, if you're a regular listener to HomeWord, I oftentimes, take my own content. I'm kind of a content guy, and we talk about it. But today I'm going to take Camille's content because I wanted to leave you with some really practical advice if you're a caretaker at all. One of the statements that she said that I underlined and put a star by it is, you are not superhuman when it comes to chronic situations. So sometimes we have to understand that. And I want to give you, out of her book, some important points that are so very practical. I'm just going to list them, but I think this will give you some insight. And again, you can get a lot more info in the book. Get enough sleep. Isn't that crazy? She started with get enough sleep. When you're caretaking for somebody, you're putting in extra hours, extra time, there's extra emotion. Get enough sleep. Have boundaries and keep your priorities, okay? A lot of times people who are caretaking, they go down. They end up going down because they didn't have some boundaries and they didn't keep their own priorities. Get and receive help from other people. Who's your community? She has a whole section on that? Who's your community? Who's your tribe who comes around you? You know, when Moses was battling and the Israelites were battling the Amalekites, he was weary in a war. And so he sat down, and then the Amalekites started winning, but he had a rod, and finally he put the rod up and he had people come around him so that in his weariness, they held his arms. And you know what? Do this with others. And it's a great point that she made. Stay healthy physically. Make sure you're taking that time because, you know, you're tired. When you're dealing with emotions, in most tough situations with secondhand suffering, you know, you're just exhausted. But still, I don't care what it is. Go for a walk, smell the air, do whatever, but keep in shape. She said that. Play, meditate, spend time alone. Yeah, not play. Well, play.
We'll play too.
But pray, meditate, and time alone. That's where you're going to get help. You know, for me, when I've been in situations not like hers, because hers is like on steroids, but, you know, praying has been an important part. It's also been going to the Psalms, because the Psalms to me, and Psalms and actually Proverbs are great things of even lament. You know, there are lament Psalms. And so, you know, go through that. In this great stuff, this is actually in the book. I'm taking it word for word. Turn to your support group and close friends to help hold you up emotionally. There's just going to be times when you're going to kind of break apart. You will. And that's normal. So they need to be there. I call them replenishing relationships. Refuel yourself with what gives you joy and doesn't drain you. And sometimes, let's just be honest, when you're dealing as a caregiver, it's draining, right? And it's not their fault per se, but it is draining. So make sure that you're doing something that doesn't drain you. And take timeouts, okay? So, you know, you're not this caretaker 24/7. And if you are, you're going to fade after a while. And there's so many people who are listening or watching this who are actually in the middle of that. And you're fading. I know it. You're fading emotionally, spiritually, physically, in every way. And so sometimes you just take a time out, take a minute vacation, take a time where you have a respite for, you know, a few days or a week or whatever. Just make that happen. Anyway, some great advice from Camille Block. Again, the book is called Hope for Secondhand Suffering. I highly suggest that you take a peek at that. It's been great advice. Again, thank you so much for being with us. You're amazing.
Thank you. You're amazing. Yeah. I'm so grateful to be here.
Yeah, so good. Anyway, thanks again to Camille. Until next time, I'm Jim Burns. So happy to be able to put this podcast on together for you.